Well, thank you, Traveling Wilburys. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Bob Hieronimus, and our executive producer and research assistant is Laura Kortner, and our engineer is Anita Brockington. Well, our guest tonight is my old friend Skip Brooks. And when I say old friend, I mean we first met the summer after I graduated, or granulated, as they used to say, from Baltimore City College in 1961. Now, that's a 60-year friendship, which I think is pretty long. But I just learned from Skip Brooks that he has known somebody else even much longer than that. Isn't that right, Skip?
Yes, it is. Good old friend Nick Genovese, who lives in San Diego. He's a retired professor from San Diego State, and he was the chair of the classics department, and he was real helpful in getting me through my last book. He did a couple of really critical reads of it, and he was very good, yeah. But I've known him since we were 5. I have a memory of him and me as 5-year-olds standing in a safety zone on Harford Road, waiting for the streetcar to go to school.
Oh, I remember
first grade at St. Dominic's.
I remember Harford Road.
That's a long time.
Okay, well, we first met when I was working in Ocean City, Maryland, at the restaurant on the boardwalk and 25th Street. For about 12 hours a day, I washed pots and pans, eventually working my way up to managing the kitchen. So many people got fired and quit during my stay there that I went from a pot washer to a dishwasher and then up, and spent the entire summer there. Well, managing the kitchen. And by the night, hanging out on the beaches trying to meet the ladies. It was there that I first heard the music of my fellow Baltimorean Skip Brooks, whose guitar and banjo and wonderful voice made my late afternoons and evenings there a joy. We sang together such classics as Michael, Row Your Boat Ashore, and what about Hang Down Your Head, Tom? Dooley. Now, how is that pronounced? That's incorrect. It's not Dooley, it's Dooley?
No, his name was Tom Dula.
Dula. Oh, yes, good old Tom Dula.
But it doesn't, it plays better on a song with the EY on it.
It sure does. It sounds a lot better that way. And we even started attracting some attention with some of the ladies near the end of the summer. And at the end of summer, I returned to my freshman year at Towson State Teachers College, now Towson University, and Skip and I continued singing together in a little group that had many names over the years. We posted a photo of us in 1963 when we were called the Blackwood Singers, but I also remember being called the Cambridge Singers and several other names. I'm not going to mention all the other names because I don't know them all. Skip was the most talented of our group and went on to record professionally. He wrote several novels, and he's joining us for both hours tonight to reminisce about our early harmonious days in Baltimore. We will be talking about his newly released novels in the Mountain Trilogy, 99 Years in the Great Smoky Mountains, as well as listening to his latest music from a CD compilation called Original Sins. Welcome back to 21st Century Radio, Brother Skip Brooks. Yay!
Brother Bob.
Yes.
Brother Bob, how you doing? We ought to have piped in applause,
Yeah.
like a laugh track or something.
Well, how's your pitching arm doing now? Is your pitching arm all right?
Yeah, I'm just getting old and arthritic a bit in my hands, especially. My guitar playing is not as good as it used to be. There's 2 things if you're a guitarist that you have to pay attention to.
Well,
You've got to sing in tune, and you've got to play your guitar in tune, and you can't get what's called string buzz, which means you're not pressing the string down hard enough. And as I lose my grip on my left-hand grip, I'm finding that I'm getting too much string buzz. So I'm going to go back to being a keyboard player for the next CD that I work on.
Well, let's start
But
with...
other than that, I'm doing okay. I got a bad back, but everybody who gets old has a bad back. So.
Okay, wait, all you got to do is sit up straight. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah, that is for sure. Now, let's start with the basic how are you question, which, since the pandemic lockdown, is a much deeper question than it used to be. How have you been surviving?
I've been doing pretty well. I'm basically a hermit. I like, being. I'm an only child. I was, raised alone. There weren't any other kids in the house, so I can entertain myself well. But I've been hibernating for almost a year now in the house. We had the house remodeled about 3, 4 years ago, so it's a nice place to be a hermit.
Hmm.
And I have a really cozy little screen porch, and I do most of my writing out there in the warm months, and take care of the cats,
Where,
and just have been around the house. I don't go out much. I'll go to the store. I'll run a few errands, but I wear my mask religiously. I social distance religiously, and I got um, my second vaccine shot last Saturday. So I'm
congratulations.
coming along pretty well.
Yes, you
Yeah,
are. Well, look, another basic how are you question is how have you been surviving what's happening with our politics these past years? I know you're not a fan of Donald Trump. I'm neither. But tell us your
I'm not. I
thoughts.
don't want to. Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into my dislike of him, but
You,
because you probably have some people who are listening who like him, so
oh,
I'll just
sure.
say that, or maybe not. I don't know. So I'll just say, it's good to get on with it and to get back to a little bit of political normalcy. I'm always amazed at uh, at at how politics can impact us so much. I read a book a couple of years ago by a guy named William Fry. Have you ever heard
Hmm.
of Bill Fry?
Yes.
He's a Harvard professor and all that, and he's a guy who's really sharp in
I
demographics.
think what's his book, Diversity Explosion?
Diversity explosion, yes. And it's I'm not much for reading books with charts and graphs and all that kind of stuff on it. So it was a heavy slog for me. But it really stuck with me that what started in 2008 and will probably go on close to 2030 is a massive demographic change in this country. And what we are dealing with now in our politics is a direct result of that. It's the rise of so many racial minorities and national minorities, and they are all coming into power. And people like you and me with our skin color are many of us are fighting it tooth and nail. But it's all just about change. At the bottom of it all, it's everything in America is changing, and there's a lot of resentment about it. And a lot of so anyway, I recommend Bill Fry's book. It's just a brilliant book if you really want to get a handle on what's going on in our country politically and socially and all those kinds of things.
Well,
Take a read of it.
how
It's really,
does
really good.
how does he see this ending in around 2030? What will we be
Well,
like when we get there?
our generation will die off, and that'll take care of a lot of it. But millennials are. This is millennials moving into positions of power, and in Birmingham, we've seen it. We have a very young black mayor in Birmingham, very sharp guy, and this is Birmingham. I mean, I first played Birmingham in 1965, and had to drive through a civil rights march to get to the gig. And
Mm,
Birmingham was rough, let me tell you,
yeah.
in the middle '60s.
Hmm.
And now it's really a hip little city. It's coming along. It's all because of the younger generation doing that. And there are less and less older people, um, and there will be less and less every year. And finally, by 2030, we'll all be minorities in America. All our
Hmm.
skin colors and all of our ethnicities and all of that will just all it'll be a nation of minorities, and that is massive change. That's something that's going to cause us a lot more problems before we get there. But
Well,
it's the biggest one this country's ever had. I was just really impressed with this book. It was just it's just really really good. Really
well,
stuck with me, and after reading his book, I'm not surprised that Donald Trump was elected in 2016. There's a lot of resentment and anger and a lot of things that people aren't
Mm-hmm.
going, folks aren't swallowing very well. And so the result was Donald Trump. And it was kind of a turbulent 4 years. I'm hoping we have a little less turbulence.
Yes, we need a lot less turbulence.
Hopefully we can get back. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I think with this president, we're going to get a lot
Yeah.
better. And, one of the good things about this in regards to how I see in fairness is that there are 16 women that have been waiting to him to get out of office before they can try to sue him. And
Yeah.
and what's amazing to me is this is just in the United States of America, but in England there's even others that deal with
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
younger children. I mean, not children.
Yeah.
Yes, they are children. When I mentioned that on the air some time ago, I was told I couldn't talk about it until he doesn't become president. And that's really crazy because that's a terrible thing that
Yeah.
that he was involved in. Well, before we get into your
Well,
books,
he's going to have Donald Trump's going to have a lot of legal things keeping him busy for the next couple of years, just coming at him from all directions.
well,
So
yes, you're
we'll
right.
see how that works out.
He's got a lot of karma, a lot of karma. Now, before we get
Yes.
into your books, we can we just relive the past a little bit more? We've done this these
Sure.
interviews
Hey,
before.
it's your show.
Okay, well, okay, I'll take over then. I thought you were going to take over, but
No.
those experiences. What do you remember about the summer of 1961 in Ocean City when we met?
Very little. I remember when you popped down on the sand on a blanket next to me, and I was playing my guitar or something,
You had a blanket?
and you were. Yeah, I guess I did. I don't know. But anyway, there you were, and we started singing together. It was just that kind of time in our lives, and it was summer in OC, and but that's really all I remember. I remember that you had a lot of yellow hair hanging down,
Well, it's white now.
and here he came, and he popped, and you had a lot of enthusiasm, which I liked.
Yeah.
So off we went.
Do you remember how we stayed in touch after playing down in the ocean? Did we leave the ocean that summer already planning to meet up in Baltimore and sing together, or did that come later on? I can't remember that.
I think so. I think so, because
What
I
do you
think it
think,
wasn't
though?
long after that we started playing, and Pat Klebanow, the long lost Pat
Oh
Klebanow,
yes, oh yes,
was
handsome
he played
guy.
congas, but
He was a
yeah,
handsome guy. Yeah, the women are
yeah,
always going after Pat Clovenel.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
oh yeah.
yeah, better.
But
Yeah,
anyway, he played congas. So I remember we used to rehearse at your house, I think in Northwood, and
hmm
just kind of went from there. I don't remember really a lot of where we played. I know we played around a good bit,
we sure did.
but the one I do remember was we played is it called a varsity dance?
A
I guess it
varsity
was on
dance.
Thanksgiving. It must have been 61 or 62 at Gwyn Oak. I think it was at Gwyn Oak. And
Yeah.
who's the group from years ago that did Youngblood and Searching?
Oh,
You know what I mean?
search
The
on
Coasters.
coasters, right? You just won a free trip
And
to
they were
Bermuda.
there.
Good going. I
Yeah,
remember that.
they were the headline act. And I remember they came in and they did their routine, they did their act, and then they got out of there real fast. And about a half hour later, the treasury agents were looking for them for tax problems.
For what? Tax
and,
run?
and they dismissed them. It was that kind of thing. But I remember the varsity dance. I remember standing up in front of all those drunken people, and off we went to a great career, a long career as folk singers.
Well, during my years of singing at Towson State, I ran
Yeah.
into a lot of problems, especially the envy from what are called the jocks at Towson. Towson,
Yeah.
many of the male students, when we got there, who were good at sports, they were also much older than we were because they deferred their college and they're serving. They were coming out of the military.
Yeah.
Coming out of the military, they were 10, well, looked like us, 10 to 20 years older than we were. And if you had any kind of trouble, I wonder if you had any kind of trouble that I did as our singing groups started getting popular.
I never did. I'm one of those people who kind of gets along with everybody. I don't seem to, get people who love me dearly or people who hate me dearly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, So I was aware that you were having some issues.
Really, they were.
When we were there, but I didn't go to school there, so I just hung out there.
Yeah, you lucky guy. You lucky guy.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
they were paying attention to us, and that was a bit too much. In their opinion, they had to get even, and they wanted to get even by basically breaking my nose and beating me up.
Yeah.
So, because they said, we gotta teach you a lesson in the form of a punch in the nose and maybe some broken bones. But fortunately, one of their ladies came to me and tipped me off and said, "Hey, the streetcar you always take to go home?"
Yeah.
And I said,
Take a different one.
He said, "Yes, you got to take a different one because they're hanging out down there and they're going to take turns beating you up." And I said, "What?" And they said, "Yep." So fortunately, that same night, I looked down there and there they were. They were all hanging down around there.
Yeah.
Well, fortunately, all I had to do was go to the right and miss the whole group of them, and that really got them angry. But they got back at me later on by hanging me in effigy.
You were a real cutie pie back in those days.
Well,
They probably didn't like that you might put a little pressure on their girlfriends.
Well, they didn't. As a matter of fact, they knew I was a wrestler also, but I was like a 125-pound wrestler. They wanted me to wrestle a guy that was about 180 to 200 pounds, but I didn't. For some reason, I thought I wasn't going to do it. Now, hey, we got to move on into this. I'm having too much good time on this. So we're going to take a break here on 21st Century Radio with our guest Skip Brooks. The Mountain Trilogy we're going to talk about tonight. He's written it. 99 years in the Great Smokies. Hazel Creek, I think we're going to talk about that soon. We'll be back in just a few minutes. For the Beatles fans in your life, makes a great present. Announcing our new book on the Beatles' Yellow Submarine, on sale now at yellowsubmarinebook.com. It couldn't be simpler. That's yellowsubmarinebook.com. Full of color with over 200 illustrations, plus all new interviews and symbolic interpretations. It's all in the mind, inside the Beatles' Yellow Submarine Volume 2. Loads of valuable bonus prizes and contests offered on our Facebook page, /Yellow Submarine Book. Follow us there and win some toys. This book dives deep. Haven't you ever wondered what it all means when we say we all live in a yellow submarine? Well, order this book and find out. yellowsubmarinebook.com. That's yellowsubmarinebook.com.
Hi, this is Sweet Lou of the Dell Vikings, and you're listening to 21st Century Radio with Dr. Bob Hieronimus.
Woke up this morning with an ache in my head and a telegram laying across my chest. Said you've been awarded first prize loser of the year. Pack up your bags and hide the telephone. Lock up your doors and get back on the road. Just goes to prove sometimes you lose.
Well, you're listening to music Sometimes You Lose by Skip Brooks. Yep, that's him, all right. Now, let's move on now. You took a family trip to Scotland and Ireland. Is that correct?
I did, and And while we're in Scotland and Ireland, I want to bring something up that a Facebook friend of mine asked me to ask you tonight.
I got to
And
go
he
now.
wanted huh?
I said I
And
got
he
to.
wanted to know if you remember the guy who chauffeured you and Zoe around London years ago. A guy named Mick Craig. Do you remember Mick
Yes,
Craig?
yes, I do. He was a tall guy.
Yes, he was. He said when you said goodbye, you hugged him. You were the only client who had ever hugged him, but you had to stand up on a curb to,
That's right.
to
We,
hug him.
well, you don't do too much hugging in England at that particular time,
No,
and,
yeah, he
especially
was
now.
really
You can't.
surprised. But anyway, Mick's a football English football fan, and so am I. So we kind of hooked up on Facebook for that. But I was so surprised when he said, "Ask Bob about," And I thought, "Oh my God, it's such a small world."
Yeah, I'll
So
say.
anyway, that's my Mick Craig comments. So you want to talk about the books?
Yeah.
It's
Well,
a
wait. Well,
long
first,
it's a
for
long tale.
okay, we're going to start talking about the books then, because you came here just to do that, right?
Well, yeah, but I also came here to hang out with you. You know,
Yeah.
it's been
Well,
we only hang out together every couple of years, so I
it's,
wanted to make the most of it.
oh yes. Okay. Yeah. What about the muse that you picked up when you went on to Ireland?
Oh, I actually did. The Irish trip pushed me a bit to finish the third book.
Hmm.
I always wanted to write a trilogy. I always wanted to, when this started with Hazel Creek many years ago, back in the 90s. My goal had been to write 100 years in the Smokies, and I only got to 99 years. It covers years 1838 to 1937. But Ireland kind of gave me some sort of fill-in material to use in the third book. And if you've gotten through Aedan's Cove, you probably know what I'm talking about because it has a good bit to do with contemporary Ireland in the 30s, 1930s. So anyway, yeah, we went to Scotland and Ireland. My wife retired from the university 4 years ago, and we had always wanted to go, so we planned a trip first to Scotland. My daughter and my son to hiked the 100-mile West Highland Way
Oh my.
in in the Highlands in Scotland. Took them a week, but they went over a week early, and then we flew into Edinburgh and drove up to Fort William up in the Highlands and met them up there as they finished it. Then we came back to Glasgow and went then for about a week or so in Ireland, and it was just went chasing the ancestor, wanted to see the county and the little town he had lived in, and before he escaped the famine and came to actually he went to Washington D.C. and then Baltimore back in the 1850s. But it was really very rewarding. It was kind of like, I don't know, it kind of felt right, felt good.
Well,
I tell everybody if I'd been 30 years younger, I probably would have stayed. It was really nice. But what I was really surprised at was that I liked Scotland so much. I didn't think much of, the goal had been Ireland, but we wound up going to Scotland, to pick up our offspring. And boy, it really stuck with me. I'd like to go back.
well, maybe you lived there before.
Could be. I mean, it's highly possible. My ancient ancestor back in the 1600s left Ayrshire, which is south, kind of where Glasgow is, and went across into Northern Ireland to work on the plantations there that the English had set up.
I had
So
to.
really, I'm an Ulsterman of what Irish I have in me is Ulster. It's Cavan County, just right below the Northern Ireland border.
Hmm.
And for some reason, we didn't get into Northern Ireland this time, but I'd also like to go back and see that. But
First of all,
that part of me is Scots-Irish, so I understand how the folks are who don't want to wear their, in the South especially, who don't want to wear masks and rebel against any authority. They're just all Scots-Irishmen, and I can understand that. I'm a bit of a rebel myself, I suppose.
well, we may lose a lot of Scotch-Irish people that way, though.
Yes,
We're
there's an
borderlining.
awful lot of them here.
We're borderlining on 500,000 deaths.
I think we hit it today.
It's about a 500,000 people, and some people are, like to think, hey, there's no problem there. you don't have to wear a mask. You
Yeah.
don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. And the old president was one of the guys that really screwed us up on that. That was really
Well,
terrible.
yeah, it didn't have to be this bad.
No, it didn't have to be at all. We lost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people because of him. And that's something I think
Yeah,
that's
well,
heavy
yeah.
karma. That's very heavy karma.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
Yeah,
but
he'll come back as a banana slug or something. So anyway, Hazel Creek. Hazel Creek is actually a longer tale, and it does have to do with the Muse. But I didn't find the Muse in Ireland. I found the Muse in Western North Carolina. It started actually. I was researching my wife's family, and I found my wife is from Maryville, Tennessee. She was born there, and which is a little 15, 20 minutes south of Knoxville. And I was doing her just kind of, following the generations back until I came to one John Hall, who lived in St. James Parish, which I believe is Harford County now, up around the gunpowder back in the early 1700s. And around about 1770 or 75, somewhere around there, he migrated south to Burke County, North Carolina, and east Baltimore County west, another county, and so being the protagonist of the first book, Hazel Creek, which is it's a memoir. It's his story, and as through my fiction brain, it's his story, and he was the one who got in my head and kept bugging me to write this and write it. And so I wrote it out, and it was horrible, and I rewrote it, and it was just as horrible. But I finally got it to a place where I was reasonably happy with it, and I had come across a company called the Editorial Department, and they were in Greenville, Tennessee, and the lead editor was a woman named Rennie Brown, who back in the 60s had been a really hotshot editor in New York for Scribner's and a couple of other she knew her business. And she edited actually Monteith's Mountains. I had submitted Hazel Creek to her, and then one day I sort of off on, well, what am I going to do after Hazel Creek? So I wrote a couple of paragraphs, a couple of chapters, and I sent them up to her. And she said, let's put Hazel Creek on the shelf and we'll do this. So the second book in the trilogy was actually the first one published, and that's Monteith's Mountains, which was published 19 years ago. How about that?
wow, 19 years ago. Is right.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that reminds me.
And so,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
that's the first show we did. Was in 2002, I think it was, and that's when. Yeah, that's when Monteith's Mountains was published.
Well, we talked about your.
But anyway,
Well, I was going to say we talked about the trilogy there. The thing about 2002 that I wanted to point out before we pass on to this, that was very strange because I listened to that interview in preparation for our talk tonight, and you know what parallel I discovered? I discovered in October 2002 I had just published my first Yellow Submarine book called Inside the Yellow Submarine, and we talked about the Yellow Submarine during that interview.
Yeah.
And now today you're joining us about 19 years after your first book, and you have come out with the companion volumes of 1 and 3. And now today, at the same time, 19 years later, Laura and I have just published volume 2 of our Yellow Submarine research called It's All in the Mind. And what a coincidence that it took both of us 19 years to complete the set to the very same day. So that's very peculiar.
Yeah.
You can't.
Maybe it's synchronicity. Maybe Carl Jung would be happy with this one. Huh?
Yes, I would be happy if I got to meet Charles Jung again. Yes, especially in regards to revealing this.
He's my favorite shrink.
Is he? Well,
Jung is my favorite shrink. Yeah.
What did it cost to go to him? Do you remember?
Oh no, he died years ago.
Oh,
he's long gone. Carl Jung was a student of Sigmund Freud, but they broke on,
And then Sigmund Freud, near the end of his life, said all about symbols. It's all about symbols, and that's what Carl Jung concluded maybe 20 or 30 years before. We're going to take a break here on
Later.
21st Century Radio.
Okay.
And we'll take a break, and we'll be back with our guest, Skip Brooks, the Mountain Trilogy, 99 Years in the Great Smokies. We're going to talk about Hazel Creek, I would hope at that particular time, and a number of other things when return. SkipBrooksProjects.com. I'll say it one more time. SkipBrooksProjects.com. Find the links to our guests on 21st Century Radio Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and share.
Hi, this is Diz Russell of Sonny Till's Legendary Orioles, and you're listening to the Bob Hieronimus Show, and thank you very much for listening.
Man lives where he lays his head, fenced in by the rules he's made. Won't somebody please take away these blues?
All right, taking away the blues. Well, back to 21st Century Radio with our guest, Skip Brooks. Skip, I want to go through each book of your trilogy now and talk about the story and the characters. But first, can we talk for a bit about the writing process? The writing process is different for each writer, so tell us what it was like for you to go from the idea to the research to where you find the plot, the cast of the characters, etc., and things like that. Can you do that for us, please?
The first one pretty much wrote itself. I got this character in my head. His name was Jacob Fonslow Hall. Everybody called him Fonzie. And I was worried about that if I was going to write a book that the main character's name was the same as Henry Winkler's character in that TV show. It was called Happy Days.
Yeah.
The Fonz. But anyway, that pretty much wrote itself. It was just a story in linear time from birth to death. The second, and I didn't have to, it really kind of did its own thing. How can I put this? It was not difficult. It just rolled right out. It rolled out like a good song rolls out when you write and you don't make any changes to it. Well, I did a lot of changes to this one, but at the end of the day, it was still a linear life memoir. Mm-hmm. The second book, the characters were based upon people I knew. So I had a real sort of visual for each of the characters. And what I learned about characters was the second book. What I learned about the characters is that in that book, I went in with visual impressions of each of the characters, what they looked like, just had it in my head. And during the process of writing, you write, you rewrite, you edit, you rewrite, you write, you do all that over and over and over again. But what that does is it causes the characters to assume roles all unto themselves. And at a certain point in Monteith's Mountains, I was aware that the characters are taking over. I know it sounds all, strange and weird, but that's exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the characters would surprise me when I was writing it and scare me when I was writing it and all that. I sort of pasted it together. I had a direction I wanted to go in. I had no outline. I had nothing in front. I just started writing it. And it kind of structured itself as we went through. So that was the second book. The first book was Hazel Creek, the memoir. The third book, called Aedan's Cove, I really kind of charted that one out. I created an outline. I created the characters, wrote down their visuals. I was really prepared going into it. And it's not a long book. It's the shortest book of the three. But there's my cat. But it's a farewell of the characters to the place and the families at the time who were being evicted from their lands in the park by the United States government or by the state of to create the park. And so it was a farewell, and I knew pretty much it was a little more, a little less out of the blue, and a little more, I knew exactly where I wanted to go. I knew exactly what each character was supposed to do. I knew what the ending was going to be like, For me, each one was different, but I'm working on a couple more ideas now, one of which has got me stumped, and the other one I'm just in a kind of a thinking stage about it. But I think I'm a little more structured now as far as finding characters, learning about them, and then getting them onto paper the first time, understanding it. I'm going to have to lay that down on paper a couple of hundred times before it's done. But it's all about characters. Some people are big into plots. Like there's a guy who wrote The Firm. You know what I mean?
John Grisham. John Grisham?
Yeah, John Grisham.
Did I win a prize?
And nah, you don't win a prize.
Oh, okay.
But Grisham is real plot driven. He doesn't do much with characters. Every book I've written of his, as good as it is in the plot and the way he carries it on, and he's really good at that. I can't remember the characters after I put the book away. They don't stay with me. And then there's other people like me who are probably more character driven than plot driven. And so that's what I kind of lean on. I say, I want to write about this guy, this woman, this guy, and I've got this setting I want to put them in, and then I just kind of live with it, and do some research, a little more research, and try to get a feel for their time and for what's going on in their heads and that sort of thing. I'm not real plot oriented. I have a hard time thinking about them. I really like to see where the book goes. I like to be a part of that.
Well, that's part of
that's my story.
That's part of the creative situation. I mean, because one's ideas don't necessarily flow all strong right away. They develop over a period of time.
And right. And not only that, but so much of it is internal. You're dealing with your own personality and your likes and your dislikes that the Buddha says we should never get attached to, and you're kind of a little more, like I don't want too much of me in my characters, and if left to my own devices, there'd be a lot of me in my characters, so that I really try to make them different and distinct and all by themselves, and that it's all internal. I'm looking forward. This one. It's called Sydney and George, and it's just a story idea. I've got characters, and I've got a rough plot, a rough goal to get to, but I'm just taking some time to think about the characters and feel them inside. I know it sounds kind of hokey, but you have to. If you're writing fiction, you have to feel those characters. You've got to, in some sense, be them with their own rules. You know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean, but I'd like to know, when do you do this? Do you do this during the afternoon, evening, morning, etc.?
Late morning.
Late morning.
I'm a very early riser. Yeah, I get up at about 5 to 5:30.
Do you have a cup of coffee?
Do a workout. I have a lot of coffee. Yeah, and I try to catch the news, and I might throw some bread in to bake. I've got a bread maker, and I make a lot of bread. I love to do that.
Oh,
but I'll usually pick a time, especially in the warm months, to go out on the screen porch and just kind of spend a couple of hours working on it. But I'm always thinking about it. I mean, I don't work out in the real world anymore. I hate the word retired, because it's like, well, we're going to put you in this drawer over here and close it. I don't like that idea. I like to be active, and if I'm not, out working in a real job, then at least I can be mentally active. And writing really keeps you that way. Writing.
Do you ever have?
Get senile when you write.
Do you ever have any characters in your dreams come to you?
I'm one of those people who never remembers his dreams.
Yeah, ditto.
I literally never remember them. I don't know what I dream about. When I go to sleep, and I'm done.
Well, we're going to get to the central characters in the books the next hour, which is just about 10
Okay.
minutes away from now. But let's get to the Mountain Trilogy, 99 Years in Great Smokies. What is the importance of the Great Smoky Mountains, both to you and also to those who live there?
Well, that's a lot of different levels. To me, it all comes down to one moment in time. In 1965, I'd gone to Gatlinburg to do a booking conference down there when I was playing music out in New York, and I had too much to drink the first night we got there, and I had a hangover the next morning, and I walked out to the street to find a place to get some breakfast. And I walked up the street and I looked off to my left, and there was this big mountain, this huge mountain called Mount LeConte, and it was like I got hit by a thunderbolt. And I never lost that interest in the mountains, and I worked hard to finally live there. I moved there in 1870, right? No, in 1970. So the mountains to me were a place where I was really, it was a place of security. It felt very much comfortable and secure there. Yeah, I felt really good about living in the mountains.
Were these mountains
now for the people who, go ahead.
Were these mountains pointy mountains, or were they round hill?
No, they're green.
Green.
Yeah, green mountains. Yeah, very old mountains, and I got to know a lot of the people there. The people, not the tourists, but the people, and made a lot of long-lasting friendships while I was there. But it's just a place where I got really caught up in it. I got hooked. And just kept writing about it. Now, to the people who live there year-round, they're mostly working or own businesses, so it's a source of income for them, and the commercial aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the tourists who come there, I'm not sure why half of them go there anyway, but they just walk around and buy junk off the main street. But the mountains themselves they're just very, I love the mountains. So just always, from 1965 on, they just got inside me and wouldn't let me go. So much so that I wrote 3 books about it. Yeah.
Well, have you ever heard of the stories of there being UFOs in those mountains?
Yeah, a little bit. I also heard the stories of Bigfoot in the mountains too, but I've never run across any. And the only thing I ever saw that was interesting in the sky was the comet Kohoutek. I went out.
I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah, if you go up in the mountain in the late 70s, I think it was.
Yeah.
If you go up in the mountains on a really clear winter or fall night, boy, the sky is just something to watch. And we all drove up to the top of the mountains to watch Kohoutek. But no, I've never seen a UFO or never seen a Sasquatch back in the mountains. I've just seen a lot of bears and boars and.
You talked about some real big bears in those mountains. That was really astounding.
They can be. Yeah, they can be. Generally, they're pretty peaceful beasts. They won't attack you. If they're cubs, they might. But people are more scared. They're more scared of us than we are of them. They're herbivores. They don't eat. They don't eat meat, and
right.
They're pretty easy. But some fool back around 1900 introduced Russian boars into the mountains, and they've become a real nuisance, and they can be nasty.
Oh my God!
They can be 200 to 300 pounds of tusks,
Whoa, boy!
And they will give you a hard time.
Well,
a few trees.
We're going to have a hard time if we don't get ready to take our break here on 21st Century Radio. Our guest, Skip Brooks, and we're going to be talking about the Mountain Trilogy, 99 Years in the Great Smokies, and we're going to cover we're going to get a rundown of the central characters in these books so that we can follow the storyline, which I find to be amazing, mainly because of the things that I learned about the Great Smokies from my visit with my wife when we went there. One of the things we loved about North Carolina especially was the gemstones, the kind of stones that were all over the place. I mean, big as golf balls kind of stones kind of thing. Now we'll be back with our guest, Skip Brooks, Mountain Trilogy, Hazel Creek is one we're going to talk about right away, I believe. And plus musical selections, we're going to also be hearing from his CD, Original Sins. skipbrooksprojects.com.